Have you ever wondered why a tennis elbow can take 6 to 12 months to heal, while a broken leg only takes 6 to 8 weeks? Well, the reality is that your tennis elbow shouldn't take that long. After all, it's a lot less serious an injury. And the reason it takes so long is that doctors too often get the cause wrong. Now, they say it's caused by repeated use pulling on your elbow, when it's really caused by repeated use and constant tension caused by a problem with your forearm muscles. And because they forget the second half, they think that if you stop using your forearm muscles, it'll stop the stress on your elbow and allow it to heal. But of course, the constant tension from the problem muscles will still be there, so it doesn't. Now, what that means is that you get told to rest and take painkillers, but after a few weeks it's still not healed. Then it will be massages to your elbow, needles, lasers and exercise. Now, of course, the abnormal tension will still be there, so it won't heal. So all those treatments do is stir the problem up. Now, the good news is that problems with your forearm muscles are easy to deal with. And if you take care of that, your elbow can heal normally. Now, in this video, I'll quickly run over what tennis elbow is and how those muscle problems cause abnormal tension. Then I'll show you how to do a simple test to see if you have tennis elbow and a problem with your muscles. Then I'll show you a simple way to take care of that problem. Now, tennis elbow is pain on the outside of your elbow where most of your forearm muscles attach. Now, it's usually aggravated by things such as gripping and twisting. Now, every medical text will tell you that it's caused by repeated use of your forearm muscles causing stress on the muscle attachment, and it'll have a diagram like this. Now, the attachment point at the outside of your elbow is called a lateral epicondyle, so the technical name of the condition is lateral epicondylitis. Now, what the medical tests won't tell you is the extra tension from the abnormally tight muscles shown here. Now, that abnormal tension is caused by a condition known as myofascial trigger points in your muscles, or trigger points for short. Now, they're those tender lumps in your muscles that therapists find. Now, basically, they're parts of your muscle that have gone into cramp or spasm. Now, when they do, it physically shortens your muscle so it becomes tight, which of course creates tension where it attaches to your elbow. Now, repeated use of your muscle causes stress at your elbow and causes trigger points to develop. So trigger points and tennis elbow practically always go together. But let's go through some simple tests to see if you have tennis elbow and if abnormal tension due to trigger points is stopping them healing. Now, to see if you have tennis elbow, use 1 or 2 fingers to examine the outside of your elbow and you'll find a bony bump. That's the lateral epicondyle where the muscle attaches. Now, for tennis elbow, it'll be tender on that bump and for about 1 centimetre towards your wrist. Next, you can do a couple of tests that put stress on that attachment, and if they hurt, it's a positive sign of tennis elbow. Now, when you do these though, just do them enough so that you can feel them aggravate the problem, but not more. Now, you don't want to be causing further damage. Now, the first test is straightening your elbow and bending your wrist down like this. That stretches your forearm muscles, putting tension on the attachment. Now, the next test is trying to bend your wrist back against some resistance. Now you know you have tennis elbow, let's look at the test to see if the overlooked trigger points are shortening your forearm muscles, creating extra tension. Now, you do this in 2 parts. First, check if you have trigger points in your forearm muscles, and second, seeing if they're affecting your elbow. Now, to check for trigger points, you examine the forearm muscles. Start with flats of several fingers and systematically examine your muscle for tightness or tenderness. Now, if you find anything suspicious, use 1 or 2 fingers to examine more deeply, looking for tight bands of muscle and tender lumps. Now, tight bands of muscle are definitely abnormal, and a trigger point will feel like tender lumps within that muscle. Now, they usually shoot pain when you press on them, and sometimes that even mimics tennis elbow. Now, if it mimics tennis elbow, that means that at least some of the elbow pain is coming from your muscles rather than your elbow. But we're not going to complicate things, so it just means that you've got trigger points and they're involved. Now, the second thing you do is see what happens when the abnormal tension from the trigger points is removed. Now, to do this, you first do the tennis elbow test I gave you, and remember how tender your elbow was and how much the stress test hurts. You next treat the trigger points to relieve the tension and see if it makes a difference. Now, if it's less tender and hurts less with the stress test after the trigger points are treated, that means the tension caused by the trigger points is a problem. Now, let's do this. Now I haven't got tennis elbow, so I'll be doing some pretend ouches. Now first I examine the outside of my elbow and find the bony bump where the muscles attach. Ouch is tender. Now I then do the stretching test, just enough to feel if it's sore but not enough to do damage, and it'll cause pain at the elbow. I then tighten the muscle against resistance and do the same thing. Now I know now that I've got tennis elbow. Now the next step is to examine my forearm muscles for tightness and tenderness. Now if I find something suspicious, I examine deeper for tightness in the muscle and tender lumps that shoot pain when I press on them. That'll be the trigger point. Now I've got an article linked in the description that gives you several alternative home treatments, but by far the quickest and easiest and most effective is using a vibration massager like one of these. Not a massage gun or a percussion massager, they don't do anywhere near as good a job. Now what I do is I put the head of the vibration massager on for about 30 seconds and then re-examine the trigger point. Now it's much better now. Now I recheck the elbow with the tension removed. Now if the trigger point was involved, the elbow will be less tender, and when I do the stress tests, they won't hurt as much. So that's how you work out if you have tennis elbow and if trigger points in your forearm muscles are involved. Now what do you do about it? Now I'll link a more comprehensive guide in the description, but basically trigger points are something that develops slowly over time and need continued therapy to get rid of. So what you do is keep repeating the therapy you use to test for the trigger points. And say if you've got one of these massages, each day you go over your forearm muscles and treat every trigger point you find. Now that would take the tension off the muscles and allow the elbow to heal as it should. Now your elbow will still be inflamed and maybe injured, so it'll need to go through a settling down process, healing and maybe rehabilitation, but without the constant tension it can do that as it should. Now as a bit of a guide, a while back I was renovating a house with painting and sanding and so forth, and I started to develop a tennis elbow. Now I did exactly as I said in the guide that I mentioned, and it was back to normal in a couple of weeks. Now if you had a problem for longer or it's a bit nastier, I encourage you to get some help in addition, but that help needs to consider your forearm muscles as I discussed. Now if it's like rest it, take some drugs, and if that doesn't work I'll stick some needles in, you know to say thanks but no thanks and find someone else. Now if you have any questions or comments, please pop them in the comments. Now if you know anybody who has tennis elbow, please share this, otherwise a simple problem may become a problem that goes on for years and never gets better. Now, thank you very much for watching, it has been most appreciated.